Hello, folks. How's it going? We just had a bit of crazy Destiny 2 news. Bungie basically saying they're going to sunset, live support for Destiny 2, essentially. So they posted this blog post 2 hours ago. It says, for almost 2 years, we've had the joy and honor to explore the Destiny universe with you all. Through all the ups and downs, surprises and triumphs, building Destiny alongside our players has been a monumental privilege. While our love for Destiny 2 has not changed, it has become clear that after the final shape, we have reached the time for our shared worlds and Destiny to live beyond Destiny 2. Which sounds a little bit promising. That sounds like at a hint of, future games, whether that's Destiny 3 or some iteration of, what was it, Destiny Payback, that project that we heard was canceled and various things like that. I think there were a number of sort of Destiny spin-offs in incubation over the years at prototype stage and pre-production and things like that. So a lot of people have been saying for a while now, pretty much since Final Shape or thereabouts, the seasons that followed, that they wanted Destiny 3. That made sense. And yeah, hopefully that will be sort of allowed to happen. Destiny has meant a lot to me over the last 12 years now. So they've always had kind of a rough uphill battle, a lot of sort of inner political turmoil of various kinds over the years. Even before Destiny 1 was even unveiled to the public, or as it was being unveiled and sort of talked about for the first time, you had, Marty O'Donnell and people like that sort of, bringing to light the complaints about the music or the internal politics of working with the publishing deal with Activision. That sort of stretched out for quite a long period of time. You had Destiny 2 launching with that key art that looks very much like, it basically looked like a Call of Duty Advanced Warfare kind of cover. And I have a weird fondness for it for various reasons, but it was like Activision always seemed like they didn't know how to market Destiny properly. It was like coming from the creators of Halo, which is like this very mythic science fiction space opera thing, sort of Destiny being very Star Warsy by nature. And then Activision being, the publisher of Call of Duty primarily around that time, and games like, anyway, Call of Duty being like the biggest series in the world. So it kind of made sense that they would want to package Destiny as like another game for you Call of Duty kids. But it wasn't that at all. And in fact, and again, there's the MMO component of that too, where it was deep into the life of Destiny 2 that Bungie was finally sort of allowing themselves to call Destiny an MMO, which was interesting, because it had always been like a shared world shooter, a sci-fi shooter, an online, multiplayer shooter, FPS, and players nowadays joke that like, oh, there's guns in this game because, the subclasses became so powerful, especially like around the time of the big Final Shape update. It's had a weird road. They had sort of the messy divorce with Activision and went independent. And you had some really golden seasons as Bungie is the independent developer doing what they want to do. Maybe working with like a smaller budget, but I think things like, I look back at like the season of Arrivals and Shadow Keep and some of all that post Forsaken stuff was really cool. I mean, it had kind of like the Forsaken afterglow to it. Like Forsaken was a really special major expansion, the likes of which, we'll probably never see again from Bungie because it was just so huge, and they had Activision support studios, doing a lot of the heavy lifting too. And they didn't have that benefit going through pretty much the rest of the game's life cycle. But yeah, they're gonna do Monument of Triumph is the big sort of final major update. That they're gonna celebrate the history of the game and the lore and the characters and bring back some fan favorite things. They're going to bring back the director, sort of. I don't know if they're killing the portal. All portal activities are still available via lists in the nodes at the bottom of the director. So, I think the portal will be kind of minimal. It looks like this, this is what the director is going to look like. It looks damn good to me. It's got a lot to fit in there, and it looks like they did a good job of getting everything together for sort of the end, so to speak. There's going to be distortion zones where some of the environments are a little bit different and add some variety, maybe some more randomness, or I'm not sure how that's going to feel, but they're going to want it to feel fresh and like the game's not going to get stale on you. Pantheon's coming back, sort of a fan favorite arena, fighting these like raid bosses and things like that. A trip down memory lane. Destination weapons and armor have been revisited to bring them to sort of the tier system that came with what was it? Edge of Fate. Yeah, Edge of Fate, and which was kind of the last time that I was like heavily playing, was like to get a bunch of tier 5 stuff. And then once I got a bunch of tier 5 stuff, grinding Edge of Fate like crazy. I played through the Renegades Star Wars campaign because I'm a big Star Wars guy, and games like Knights of the Old Republic are kind of the reason that I, was excited about what Destiny was, and how it, it kind of evolved the Halo formula into being something more like a Star Warsy, MMO RPG type thing. And so Renegades was okay. But anyway, they are bringing back Sparrow Racing. Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, the portal has been overhauled more than taken out, but they're gonna sunset. Seasonal events are going away. The Eververse is staying up. The rewards pass update. So it'll have a Monument of Triumph era rewards pass. Of course, they're going to bundle all Destiny 2 content packs into a singular purchase available June 9th with all the campaigns, Dungeon Keys, 30th Anniversary Pack, and more. That's a good call. Just sort of get everything in one sort of affordable, sensible price. That's long overdue. They should have done that a year or two ago at least. Sparrow Racing, that's going to be a nice sort of last hurrah for a lot of folks who loved that. It was very much a Destiny 1 thing that people asked for the last, 8 years? And they never brought it to 8 or 9 years. They never brought it to Destiny 2, so I don't think they did. Not that I recall. So that's going to be nice. Destiny 2 has been our home for many, many years, the blog post says. The unknown can sometimes feel wild, even a bit scary at times. Now that's human beings talking to you there at the studio. These people are fearing for their jobs, for the structure, for the future of the studio. Is Bungie going to continue to be an entity? Is it going to be a skeleton crew? BioWare famously laid off the majority of their devs recently after Dragon Age the Veilguard sort of underperformed, and they're still making Mass Effect 3, but it's probably a lot of that is outsourced to various other EA studios and things, I would imagine, for a lot of the heavy lifting, kind of like Activision did with Forsaken. But and that's common with these big mega publishers. I always think of them as that, Microsoft, EA, Sony in the case of Bungie. From all of us here at Bungie, we cannot thank you enough for joining us on this journey throughout the Sol system. You'll still find a star side for years to come, per Adausia ad Astra. Now, that could mean a couple of things. That could mean that, Destiny servers are going to remain live for years to come. And I think that's sort of the minimal baseline thing that we can expect. Good for them. They've kept Destiny 1 up and running. People still stream that. People still raid on there. Some people just prefer the first game. And I felt that way for a long time as Destiny 2 found its feet. I don't think I really feel that way anymore. I think Destiny 2 really became what it wanted to become. And I don't know, this is a sad day for me. I was in the games industry, well, in the games media as a games journalist professionally for the last 10 years. And for the first 5 years of that, was solely writing about like games and pop culture freelance. And in all that time, the only Destiny, like the only launch press event that I ever really got invited to as a games journalist was covering the launch of Destiny 2 for Rolling Stone. And it was the best time. It was the best time. And in very Bungie-like fashion, in very Destiny tradition, the preview build and the network that they had set up, Activision had set up in this hotel conference room near Bungie HQ. The game was not properly playable for the first like 3 hours that everyone was there. So Bungie's like, giving everybody like unlimited free hors d'oeuvres, booze, and everybody's just kind of drinking beer and getting drunk and talking and having a good time. And basically all the sort of like friends I have that are peers in sort of the games industry or like games journalism were pretty much mostly people that I met at that event. And, people like Matt Kim, who was at IGN for a long time as like the features editor, Alessandro, who used to work at GameSpot for a long time. Now he does a lot of mock reviews and consulting on the industry side and things like that. So many of these cool people that I met. And, I'm a guy who lives out in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest, so I don't get to do a lot of these fun sort of press junkets and things like, I sort of attended the Destiny 2 event, and I traveled for a couple other big projects, but like it was really special for me. And, I got to like just hang out and chat with like Bungie devs, interview a couple of them. I was sort of like drinking with Mark Noseworthy, and he was shit talking Bubsy. I sort of went up to him. I said, I saw you shit talking Bubsy on Twitter the other day. And, he sort of laughed about it, and I was defending it. They told us like no interviews with devs. They're too busy, no interviews. And the guy that I was sort of, hanging out with a lot there at the event, I'm blanking on his name right now. I apologize. But he was sort of like, this guy's writing for Rolling Stone. He should interview you. You should let him interview you. Even they said no interviews, but this guy's with Rolling Stone. All right. And Noseworthy's like, shit. Yeah. All right. All right. I'll talk to him. And so I get to profile Mark Noseworthy for rollingstone.com. Got to write all these different preview articles and covered the game extensively for a while for Rolling Stone and also Variety, and basically covered Destiny throughout my career, from the failed aborted attempt at an esports scene when they brought like custom matches to Destiny 1. I covered that for Kill Screen's esports blog back in the day, all the way to here we are now on YouTube doing the very sad day of news here. And like, boy, Destiny 2 had a rocky road. It had some highs and lows, but it's hard not to feel that it's, one of my favorite games ever in terms of the people I met playing online, raiding. I met people in Chicago. I met people in the United Kingdom. I met people all over the place that one of my fondest memories of a game ever is I Sherpa'd 5 newcomers, 5 first-timers through the Vault of Glass in Destiny 1. So I had to teach 5 people the mechanics of every encounter, and then, sort of coach them through the entire raid. And it probably took like 5 hours, but we did it. We got through that thing. We took Atheon down, and I don't know if I've ever sort of felt a better sense of accomplishment and pride in like a game session than what I felt with that Vault of Glass raid with those first timers. That was really fun. It was really special. And same thing with like Trials of Osiris, Trials of the Nine. Sometimes it was just randoms from like the LFG system. Sometimes it was randoms from like a forum or a Discord server. But a lot of times it was people that I met, game devs that I met. I wrote the book on Knights of the Old Republic, and a lot of the raids and Trials of Osiris stuff that I did over the years was with the producer of Knights of the Old Republic, Mike Gallo. Kind of became good friends with him and joined his clan and stuff. And it's a game that everybody can kind of, all kinds of gamers, all kinds of players, found something to love in Destiny. You have the highly competitive trials modes, you have the end game raids for the sort of the Dados and the, Astacross, people like that they're wanting to play with builds and optimize. And of course, I got really heavy into like the build crafting stuff for Final Shape, especially. Before that, I was always kind of like painfully resistant to that and sort of casual and just like, I want to use exactly what I want to use and like, relax. Don't tell me any different. But, I would use like my Fatebringer and my Vault of Glass shotgun. Was it Heathen Vengeance? No, something else. And then like Galarhorn, because I was like the OG guy. I wanted to use like my Vault of Glass stuff forever. But I got really into sort of the build crafting during the Final Shape era. And Final Shape was a glorious way to go out. And I can see what they were going for. From a business standpoint, they wanted to coast on the success and sort of milk the cow for as long as they could. Sony probably thought that was the way to go too. It was probably an agreement. We'll do this as long as we can. We'll build Destiny 3 in the background. Deej slipped up at the 2017 event when I interviewed Deej, the community manager at the time. He was already talking about Destiny 3 and Luke Smith having a vision for Destiny 3 as long ago as pre-Destiny 2 launch in 2017. So under Activision, there would have been a timeline where we would have got a Destiny 3 many, many years ago, probably like Shadowkeep or like not long, Beyond Light, something like that. So things definitely evolved. The story evolved. I mean, you saw, the writers all got their story gutted from the Destiny 1 campaign, and it was sort of repurposed into this very replayable, pretty like narrative light sort of shell of a game for a while until like the Taken King came along. But like over the years, they sort of slowly seeded back in those pieces of narrative that Joe Staten, his team had planned for the original Destiny 1 campaign with Crow and Europa and probably stuff with the Exos and the War Mines and all that, the War Sats. And yeah, like it changed, it wasn't exactly like what they had wanted it to, what it had been envisioned as, but you could definitely see the Traveler's role in Final Shape, being a callback to a lot of that stuff. And man, it's been a good time playing Destiny 2. I've been playing it a lot less the last 6 to 12 months. I played Renegades, had a good time with it. Quickly moved on. I got my lightsaber. I did the exotic mission by myself to get the lightsaber. That was a great mission, great exotic mission. Played some Trials of Osiris, went to the lighthouse one or two final times during Renegades. And I haven't touched it much since. And I'll probably hop back on real soon to kind of, especially when they do this major final update, the Monument to Triumph or whatever. But it's sad. It's a sad day to see a studio with the history that Bungie has kind of struggling to such an extent, and Marathon probably not putting up the numbers that they'd hoped it would. I think a lot of people saw that coming, but it doesn't feel good, even though we can kind of say like we saw that coming. We saw the writing on the wall with Destiny 2 kind of being where it is now for a while. But it doesn't feel good to say I told you so or anything like that to me. I think that, I look back at Activision announcing after Destiny 1 came out, they said Destiny 1's launch is the most successful new IP launch of a game in a decade, I want to say they said. So it was like since 2004, we lived in a world back then where there was Call of Duty, there was Halo, there were, FIFA and Gran Turismo and Final Fantasy and, Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead and all that stuff. Okay. But like, it was the biggest new IP launch in a decade, and it made, a killing. That from the creators of Call of Duty and Halo was a pretty compelling sales pitch. And then the reviews started to trickle in, and they're like, oh, it kind of looks like they gutted the shit out of this game before launch. And, I remember Luke Smith cracking jokes about that at the Destiny 2 launch preview event, saying, oh, that doesn't, Jason Schreier's book comes out next week, right? Like they've had an uphill battle every step of the way. So many talented people have been laid off, especially since the Sony acquisition. And it's a shame. I don't know. I'm looking forward to checking out the Monuments of Triumph event, the update, and probably, playing through some of that stuff, seeing the sort of little character beats that are going to wrap up Destiny 2 as we know it. And there's a big question mark on the horizon. Do we get a Destiny 3 in a few years? It makes sense to have the studio focus on Marathon for a while. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. They're adding full PvE, and they're going to try to adjust to player feedback, which some people are mad about, but I think, these are commercial multiplayer online first party Sony games, basically. So it makes sense to listen to player feedback, implement changes if you can, if they fit the vision of what Marathon and Destiny are. Okay. Give Marathon a good couple years of steady support. I guess my big worry beyond Marathon, beyond Destiny 2 or 3 is just like, I would like to see Bungie as a studio continue to live on. And I don't want to see it go away. I don't want to see it become sort of like a brand name that they stamp on the box, as I fear will kind of happen with BioWare by the time Mass Effect 5 perhaps rolls around, supposedly. I don't know. These are grim days for the games industry, and I think that criticize the art, criticize the medium, criticize the labor practices. But we have to acknowledge that, the people who have been around in the games industry for decades have never seen anything like the mass waves of layoffs and sort of entropy and, the capitalist Ouroboros that we're experiencing right now. That, it's unlike anything. It's comparable in some ways to sort of like the big video game crash of like the Atari 1980s era. But I mean, that's like small potato, that's peanuts compared to these big, like many billions that are, going into the industry today. And, Destiny 2 by many metrics would have been a hugely successful game for a lot of studios and publishers. It had the heavy monetization with the campaign passes, the seasonal passes, the Eververse store. It should have been a slam dunk. And the fact that a game like Destiny 2 is struggling to retain its player base, and struggling to stay profitable enough to, satisfy Sony execs and satisfy shareholders, it's a big blaring klaxon, red alert. Okay. Like it's bad. It's bad for the industry. GTA 6, like, you think about that, like too big to fail, but like nobody is really fully safe from just how bad things are in games right now. And, I don't know. I feel for all the folks at Bungie. I feel for all the folks who've been laid off at Bungie or moved on for greener pastures because of, history of harassment or abuse and like all the things that have come to light over there over the years. It's definitely I always heard from people who had been on the inside at Bungie working there that things were always improving. Under Pete Parsons, people like to make fun of Pete, and it's really easy to do because he buys all these classic cars for like, millions. It's very easy to make fun of Pete Parsons, but from what I hear, he was doing a lot to improve the culture internally in terms of like all that stuff about crunch and sexual harassment and all that stuff that was happening behind closed doors. He was supposedly making a very a big improvements, and getting rid of a lot of the misogyny and sort of sexual impropriety, and just making a more equitable, safe place for people to work. And yeah, it's like Destiny 1 Destiny 1 was kind of doomed from the start by some of the decisions made at the top. Destiny 2 just had a rough road because they were between sort of the rock and the hard place of Activision and Sony. The day that they sold to Sony, I was like, "Oh, this is going to be bad in the long run. Bad in the long run for Bungie." And again, it does not feel good to be like, we saw this coming, but I'm going to enjoy more Destiny 2 before all is said and done. I've got many thousands of hours in these games across the Xbox One, the PS4, the PS5, the Series X, the PC, on Steam. I'm going to continue to play it a little bit at certain points, especially when they do the last major update. But I don't know. Are we getting Destiny 3? It's not feeling good right now. They sort of, in the blog post, there's nothing really definitive about, will we see a sequel or not? This is very hopeful. But there's also they're very clear about they're scared. This future is uncertain. So, I feel for all those folks, and hopefully we'll get some good news next time. Thanks so much, folks.